Facebook. Howdy, folks. It's your boy, Max Mogren, reporting live for you from beautiful Alpine, Wyoming with Wake Up Wyoming. Once again, we're taking a look at the Jackson Hole Daily today, exposing the real fake news, exposing the real lies in the mainstream media. Good media literacy training. Not the most interesting and exciting, short attention span video on the internet, but better than a lot of the content out there, I hope. I'm going to start off today with a great article that posted from Paul Craig Roberts at the Institute for Political Economy on August 5th, 2017. You can find it online at paulcraigroberts.org. Fake news, a U.S. media specialty. The American media specializes in fake news. Indeed, since the Clinton regime, the American media has produced nothing but fake news. Do you remember the illegal U.S. bombing and destruction of Yugoslavia? Do you remember war criminal Slobodan Milosevic, the Serbian president branded the Butcher of the Balkans, who was compared to Hitler until Hillary passed the title on to the president of Russia? Milosevic, not Bill Clinton, was arrested and placed on trial at the International Criminal Tribunal. He died in prison, some say murdered, before he was cleared of charges by the International Tribunal. Do you remember the destruction of Iraq, justified by the orchestrated propaganda known by the criminal George W. Bush regime to be an outright lie about Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction, weapons that the UN arms inspectors verified did not exist? Iraq was destroyed. Millions of Iraqis were killed, orphaned, widowed, and displaced. Saddam Hussein was subject to a show trial, more transparent than Stalin's trial of Bukharin, and then murdered under the pretext of judicial execution. Do you remember the destruction of Libya, based entirely on Washington lies and criminal misuse of the UN no-fly resolution by turning it into a NATO bombing of Libya's military so that the CIA-armed jihadists could overthrow and murder Muammar Gaddafi? Do you remember the killer bitch Hillary Clinton? We came, we saw, he died. It goes on and on. I'll read another paragraph because it's so good. Paul Craig Roberts here from his site, paulcraigroberts.org. Do you remember the lies that the criminal Obama regime told about Assad of Syria and the planned U.S. invasion of Syria that was blocked by the UK Parliament and the Russian government? Do you remember that Obama and the killer bitch sent ISIS to do the job that U.S. troops were prevented from doing? Do you remember General Flynn revealing on TV that it was a willful decision of the criminal Obama regime to send ISIS to Syria over his objection as director of the Defense Intelligence Agency? This bit of truth told by General Flynn is hated by the Washington criminals who forced him out as Trump's national security advisor. Goes on and on. Great, great article there coming out of Paul Craig Roberts. Check it out, paulcraigroberts.org. I'd love to read it all, but super powerful. Thank you all for tuning in. Wake Up Wyoming, here we are. As usual, we're looking at the Jackson Hole Daily. Again, this newspaper services the wealthiest county per capita in North America, but it's a microcosm of a macro problem where all the money seems to be going to the extremely wealthy and the average American's just squeaking by. No different here than anywhere else. Let's get right into it. You see our headlines there. We got a lot of fun things to cover today. Also, interestingly, just so you know, I am also broadcasting live simultaneously on my Instagram personal page just to see if it's worth doing. Right now, we got one viewer there compared to the lovely 75 right here at Wake Up News. Thank you all for tuning in. Big news out of the White House and for the sage grouse. Okay, the sage grouse used to prevent development of oil and gas in the western U.S. President Trump's administration has opened the door to industry-friendly changes with a sleeping plan imposed against the sage grouse. Wildlife advocates warned that the proposed changes would undercut a hard-won struggle to protect the sage grouse. Representatives of the ranching and energy industries cheered the policy shift as needed to give states flexibility. Also, it defends their profits, right? The recommended changes released Monday by Interior Secretary Zinke recognized for the first time the importance of livestock grazing on sage-grouse habitat, said Jim Magnama, Executive Vice President of the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. Advocacy groups such as the Wilderness Society and the National Wildlife Federation said the proposal was a backdoor attempt to allow unfettered oil and gas development that ignored previous scientific studies showing that drilling too close to breeding areas would harm the birds. Wyoming, where we are here, Wake Up Wyoming, has a larger number of greater sage-grouse than any other state, and keeping the bird off the endangered list is a priority, Governor Matt Mead said, probably because if it goes on the endangered list, it'll cut into oil and gas profits even more. We've come a long way to get to this point, Mead said. As we make changes, and I certainly think there's room for improvement, we have to move cautiously because we don't want to get to the point where the bird is listed. Governor Mead saying there, it's okay for a lot of these birds to die, but we don't want it to hit the endangered species list. Important to know there's a huge new oil and gas development proposed here in Wyoming. Areas where sage-grouse live and gas drilling overlap include the upper Green River Basin of western Wyoming, home to some of the nation's biggest onshore natural gas fields. A third gas field could add an additional 3,500 wells in a 220 square mile area. Drilling could begin next year if federal land officials sign off. They probably will. A third gas field could add an additional, I already read that. Jonah Energy LLC recognizes that sage-grouse spend winters in part of its proposed gas field about 200 miles northeast of Salt Lake City. Blah, blah, blah. So long story short, as expected, the Trump administration rolling back protections for the sage-grouse. Thank you all for tuning in. Charlie Todd Dufour, what's up? Chiming in on Instagram. Haven't heard from you in a while. I'm just experimenting today. I do a live broadcast on Wake Up News with quite a good following. Much appreciated to all of you. But just experimenting today, seeing what happens if I post it on my own personal Instagram simultaneously. Moving along. Electrical co-op pushes back against solar power. Okay, solar power really growing rapidly in the U.S., a great development to see. I think that we could probably, instead of drilling a whole bunch more oil and gas wells here in Wyoming and trying to fight to keep coal online, we could use our massive wind and solar endowment to diversify the economy of Wyoming. But what do I know? Moving along, the plunging price of solar poses a challenge to utilities deeply invested in centralized power production from fossil fuel plants. The Winter Park Times reported that Fraser would like to assemble solar arrays with a capacity of 200 kilowatt hours at its wastewater treatment plant. Electricity costs the town government $180,000 a year, and town manager Jeff Durbin said solar energy would lower the cost. That would mean that the local electrical provider, Mountain Parks Electric, would have to buy the electricity and sell it back when the plant needs it. The concept, called net metering, has provoked broad discussion across the U.S. utilities, and they fought it, arguing that it presents a challenge to providing electricity. Rob Taylor, the manager of communication for the town of Mountain Parks, explained at a recent board meeting that declining solar prices available to co-op members poses a quandary for the utility. With our rates going up and the price of solar going down, it presents a real eye-opener for us. Okay, so can't stress it enough. Renewables are the way to go in the future. All this talk of investing in more outdated, inefficient, polluting oil, gas, and coal development is utterly absurd. Frankie Jr., what's up? Frankie J., thanks for tuning in. Appreciate your comments. We need more comments, more shares from y'all at Wake Up. I want to get the word out. Okay, in our headlines today, Google censors dissent in more ways than one. If you haven't read it yet, I encourage you to read the recent memo by a former Google engineer named James Damore called The Echo Chamber at Google, or Google's Echo Chamber. This guy got fired for allegedly sexist statements, and there's a really good opinion piece here in the Jackson Hole where they defend this guy. Basically, he says, you know, he was labeled as a sexist and all this and opposed to diversity, integrity, and governance by saying that Damore said men are generally more competitive and women more cooperative. Studies of the effects of testosterone and other hormones confirm that there is a biological foundation for these differing traits. He noted women prefer more workplace flexibility, generally, than men, and that accordingly Google might want to permit more part-time work to accommodate women's preferences. He pleaded above all that Google treat each worker as an individual. What happened to James Damore? He got fired for posting this, his thoughts online. Our society erupts in routine firestorms about women in technical fields because it's one of the few fields that is male-dominated. But women far outnumber men in many other realms. Despite earning 56% of all bachelor's degrees, women comprise 55% of financial managers, 59% of budget analysts, and 63% of insurance underwriters. 61% of veterinarians are women, along with 72% of PhD psychologists. Why are these disparities tolerable? Right? At Google, I think 48% of engineers are women, and they want to get it up to 50%. What Damore said about men being attracted to things and women to people is, of course, a generalization. Individuals will vary. Some women are into engineering and technical subjects just as some men are drawn to pediatrics and social work. But the bell curves are different, and the fact that men lag behind women in veterinary medicine is not necessarily due to structural sexism or discrimination. It may be a matter of preference. That was Damore's point about engineers at Google. The other truth that is obscured by this frenzy is that the economy is tilting in the direction of women's natural advantages, not men's. The post-industrial economy rewards communication skills, interpersonal skills, and cooperative efficiency. Men's physical strength, independence, and willingness to endure danger and other hardships are of diminishing value. Those are challenges we must address for everyone's good. But as Google just showed, it's a shame you can't say that and hope to survive in corporate America. So again, if you haven't checked out James Damore's comments, you should. This guy got fired from his job for expressing his opinion about the echo chamber at Google. If you watched yesterday's video, I was kind of stumbling over myself while covering and commenting on an article about a summer camp in San Francisco where that caters to transgender children, right? There have always been homosexual people. There have always been transgender people. And that's fine. It's natural. It's normal. But at the same time, there sure seems to be an alarming increase in people with gender identity concerns and the rise of homosexuality as well. Now, again, I'm not opposed to that, but I'm just wondering why it's happening. And some of us would say that there are a lot of chemicals and things out there that are making people a little confused that wouldn't otherwise be. Moving along. But like I said there, Google censoring one of their employees, firing him for speaking his mind. Interestingly, like it says in my headline there, Google censoring more ways than one. YouTube to censor controversial content brings ADL on board as flagger. This is coming from Mint Press News, published 2 days ago, August 7th, by Whitney Webb. Ever since fake news found its place among the various explanations used by the Clinton campaign and supporters to account for the candidate's loss, there has been a quiet but concerted effort on the part of establishment media, technology, and telecommunications companies to thwart the surging popularity of what? Independent media. The rise of the independent media has been largely detrimental to the once privileged position of the mainstream media, who have now lost the trust of the vast majority of Americans, and along with that trust, their ability to control political and social narratives. Chief among the groups seeking to clamp down on independent media has been Google, the massive technology company with deep connections to the U.S. intelligence community, as well as to U.S. government and business elites. Since 2015, Google has worked to become the Internet's Ministry of Truth through its creation of the First Draft Coalition, and more recently via major changes made to its search engine that curtail public access to news sites independent of the corporate media. Google has now stepped up its war on free speech and the freedom of the press through its popular subsidiary, YouTube. On Thursday, YouTube announced online that it will begin censoring content deemed controversial, even if that content does not break any laws or violate YouTube's user agreement. Misleadingly dubbed an effort to fight terror content online, the new program will flag content for review through a mix of machine algorithms and human review, guided by standards set up by expert NGOs and institutions. that are part of YouTube's Trusted Flagger program. YouTube stated that such organizations bring expert knowledge to complex issues like hate speech, radicalization, and terrorism. One of the leading institutions directing the course of the Trusted Flagger program is the Anti-Defamation League, aka the ADL. The ADL was initially founded to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all, but has gained a reputation over the years for labeling any critic of Israel's government as anti-Semite. So that's a great article. I've been impressed. Go check it out for the rest of it. YouTube moves to censor controversial content, brings ADL on board as a flagger. Also a great video put out on that topic the other day by our friend Games Exposed on YouTube. Check it out. Powerful stuff. So there we see, censorship at Google. Both of their employees, who are not allowed to speak out against the corporate culture there, and of the entire internet through its use of, changing the algorithms of its search engines to block independent news sites from showing up, and YouTube now employing the ADL and other sources to flag videos that could, through vague determinations, right? The crackdown on the new media, naturally the old media, the mainstream media, the deadstream media, the corporate media, the true fake news, the liars are threatened by people like us. So thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for sharing. If we didn't have an audience, we really wouldn't be the media, would we? New supercomputer is tremendous for Wyoming. This is pretty cool. The Wyoming economy has been struggling in recent years because of the huge downturn in coal development, which is a good thing overall, but makes it hard on Wyoming in the short term. One of the world's fastest supercomputers is helping scientists better understand the sun's behavior and predict weather months in advance. But it also got touted Tuesday as an important tool for diversifying Wyoming's economy, which has seen better days. Cheyenne, the aptly named new supercomputer located at the National Center for Atmospheric Research facility on the outskirts of Wyoming's capital city, is the world's 22nd fastest. Put to work earlier this year, Cheyenne is 3 times faster, yet 3 times more efficient than its predecessor, a machine called Yellowstone. Wyoming produces about 40% of the nation's coal. In 2016, the U.S. coal industry had its worst year in 4 decades amid competition from cheaper and cleaner burning natural gas as the preferred fuel for generating electricity. Meanwhile, renewables such as wind and solar are increasingly competitive. Thank God for that. It's about time. Scientists using the machine are developing ways to better predict weather up to 3 months out, the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research President Antonio Bulaski said. Wow, that's a mouthful. This time scale is critical for businesses, agriculture, and our military, who need reliable forecasts of longer-term weather, he said. Okay, important to note while we're on the topic of weather, we all know that geoengineering is real. We all know that weather modification has been going on for a very long time, and it's currently being executed by dozens of sovereign nations openly and hundreds of corporations all over the world. Of all those nations that have openly admitted to it, to the World Meteorological Organization of the United Nations, I think there are 53 countries that have openly admitted to it. The United States is notably absent from that, even though we are the only country who has used the weather as a weapon in the past, confirmedly, Operation Popeye during the Vietnam War. And we also developed a lot of these technologies. So, important to note that this supercomputer, this Cheyenne supercomputer, can be used for far more than merely predicting the weather, but also for attempting to manipulate the weather. Can't stress that enough here at Wake Up Wyoming. David Levy, I'm going to get to Bitcoin in just a bit when we get into the business section. But, I don't have too much to say on Bitcoin beyond the fact that it's going up substantially. At the same time, the stock market seems to be stalling out. Let's see. Trump warns North Korea. Okay, I could read this all day long, but long story short, the drums of war are beating. Okay, that's our big headline in National International today in the Jackson Hole Daily. Really not a very informative article, just fear-mongering, okay? They want us to be afraid of who? Of North Korea, of any country that could potentially threaten us. Now, the notion that North Korea is going to launch nukes at the United States is absurd. It's not going to happen. So there's no reason to be afraid of that beyond the mainstream media and the government wanting you to be afraid of that. Coming out of the anti-media today by way of Zero Hedge, NBC's Brian Williams caught saying on camera, "Our job is to scare people to death over North Korea." On Tuesday night, MSNBC's Brian Williams bluntly told his panel on the channel's flagship primetime program, The 11th Hour, that our job tonight is to scare people to death over North Korea. That's a direct quote from Brian Williams on the air. Blah, blah, blah. We could go on and on. It's no big surprise, but Brian Williams putting his foot in his mouth again. In response to Williams' unexpected and very revealing comment, Mitchell, who he was interviewing, appeared to shake her head, though it's unclear if she was approving or disapproving of what he actually said. There was no pushback by the panelists or attempt to seek clarification on Williams' words. Though the world is currently witnessing a dangerous and escalating war of words between President Trump and the so-called Hermit Kingdom, mainstream media reporting has long been driven by simplistic fear-mongering concerning the geopolitical dynamics driving tensions in the regions. The American public is generally woefully uneducated regarding the history of the U.S.-North Korean tensions and war. According to the 20th century theologian and political commentator Reinhold Niebuhr, fear is a prime means which leading public institutions and elites utilize to keep the masses loyal. Fear and sensationalized coverage is also good for ratings and advertising revenue. Niebuhr says society's myth maker, an apt description of today's major corporate media, constantly give us mere illusions divorced from the truth. Here's a quote from Niebuhr. Rationality belongs to the cool observer, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason, but faith, and his naive faith requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications which are provided by the myth maker to keep the ordinary person on course. Okay, great article out of the anti-media. That's nothing new. That's why we make shows like this, to expose the fear-mongering. You know, I'm not afraid of North Korea, all right? I'm not afraid of climate change. The weather gets a little crazy over the next 100 years. I think we're going to be okay. You know, the sea level rises slightly over the course of 100 years. I think we're going to be okay. Now, somebody playing God with the weather on a day-to-day basis, I have a problem with that. There's another article I got here about North Korea. Here we go. From the independent.co.uk, published August 7th, North Korea says it needs nuclear missiles capable of striking the U.S. mainland to prevent an invasion. Foreign minister says its arsenal is a legitimate means of self-defense. And that's true, right? North Korea has been hounded by the U.S. forever. We've got these crazy new sanctions against them where we're going to cut their overall exports by 33%, down from $3 billion annually to $2 billion annually, by blocking their ability to sell coal and fish products and stuff like that. So it's true. You know, the economy right now, despite the endless QE infinity program, printing money and gifting it to the billionaires, the U.S. economy, Western economies are showing signs of slowing down. Well, what's a great way to jumpstart the economy in the midst of, or at the onset of a recession? Keep it going is to start a big old war. You know, how did the U.S. get out of the Great Depression? World War II. You know, the United States been at war a long time. So we'll see what happens. Back to the topic of weather, climate change, and geoengineering. The government climate report undercuts the White House. Washington, AP. As President Trump totes new oil pipelines and pledges to revive the nation's struggling coal mines, federal scientists are warning that burning fossil fuels is already driving a steep increase in the United States of heat waves, droughts, and floods. In the latest example of collisions between Trump's environmental policies and the facts presented by his government experts. Contradicting Trump's claims that climate change is a hoax, the draft report representing the consensus of 13 federal agencies concluded that the evidence global warming is being driven by human activities is unambiguous. Okay, that's true. I would agree that humans are changing the climate, but there's a lot more to the story than just CO2 emissions, right? That directly undercuts statements by Trump and his cabinet casting doubt on whether the warming observed around the globe is being primarily driven by man-made carbon pollution. There are no alternative explanations, and no natural cycles are found in the observational record that can explain the observed changes in climate, says the report, citing peer-reviewed studies from climatologists. Blah, 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 goes on and on. Like I said, the mainstream media lies about the economy. The mainstream media lies to get us into wars. The mainstream media lies about things like fracking, Fukushima. The list goes on and on. And it shocks me how many well-educated, well-informed, concerned environmentalists like myself accept the mainstream narrative on climate change at face value. Okay? If the government, if all these scientists and universities and governments all over the world were really serious about getting us off of fossil fuels, they would invest in that. They would subsidize the renewable energies. They would subsidize Tesla tech that has been suppressed for over 100 years and get us off fossil fuels completely within a matter of a decade or two, right? It's out there. The technology's out there. The possibilities are endless. It's beautiful to think about it. But at the same time, these same governments who are warning us to be terrified about climate change all the time, telling us to feel guilty every time we drive our car, because we're destroying the planet and risking the lives of future generations through our CO2 emissions, they totally neglect weather modification. They totally neglect to mention geoengineering technologies, weather warfare, and at the same time that they're complaining about climate change, telling us all to fear climate change, just like we're supposed to fear North Korea. They are also subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, right? The government spent $40 million protecting an oil pipeline from a bunch of natives in a prayer encampment out in North Dakota last winter, right? All these oil pipelines, tar sands, fracking. We don't need to invest in any of these things. They could be building solar panels and wind turbines or Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower out there on the plains in North Dakota instead of another oil pipeline. Moving along. Venezuela, okay? Big sanctions against Venezuela now. Venezuela's new constitutional assembly took over the halls of the endangered opposition-controlled Congress Tuesday and decreed itself superior to all other branches of government, while prominently displaying images of the late President Hugo Chavez. The order bars anti-government lawmakers in Congress from taking any action that would interfere with the laws passed by the newly installed assembly. Delcy Rodriguez, the super body's leader, declared to a unanimous approval. "We are not threatening anyone," said Aristibulo Isutris, the Constitutional Assembly's first vice president. "We are looking for ways to coexist." Okay, the situation in Venezuela, I can't stress it enough, it's all about oil, gas, power, money, and the global banking cartel. Okay, Venezuela, Hugo Chavez stepped out of line with the petrodollar system and cut Western oil companies out of the profits. Uncle Sam wants back in. It's classic. Same sort of thing happened in Guatemala, Iran, Iraq, Yugoslavia. The list goes on and on. So we'll see what happens. Our hearts go out to the people of Venezuela dealing with crazy inflation right now. Their currency essentially worthless due to the meddling of the global financial elites. Moving along into business. Okay, we got business news. It's funny, there's all this coverage on the stock market. The stock market down slightly from its all-time record highs after a 10-day streak in the Dow. But they make no mention of the fact that alternative cryptocurrency Bitcoin has risen very significantly in the past couple of weeks. Okay, it was down to about $2,000 per Bitcoin recently. Now it's, almost doubled in value, up to $3,400. Not doubled in value, but up by, 70%, up to $3,400 per Bitcoin. I'm not a big pusher of Bitcoin, but I had to say, if you want to make some money, Cryptocurrencies seem to be the way to go. I'd be curious to get your comments. If the U.S. stock market, if global stock markets collapse, what do you think will happen with cryptocurrencies? I'd like to see that in the comments. Let me know, because I'm kind of on the fence. I don't really know. But Bitcoin soared 600 to a new record of 3,400. The trading value of the Bitcoin online currency on Monday reached a new all-time high. Blah, blah, blah. Introduced in 2009, Bitcoin has become a major form of web currency in recent years. Much of its trading success is owed to growing interest in China and India, where capital controls are putting a squeeze on cash. Fears over trade wars, currency manipulation, and economic tension in the wake of Britain's planned departure from the European Union and the election of U.S. President Trump also saw the currency's value spike. Bitcoin is an anonymous currency that is exclusively digital but unrecognized by any government. There are only a finite amount of Bitcoins, 21 million, so the currency can't be manipulated. Experts say the confidence consumers have on the currency has helped lead the rise in its value. Bitcoin's value has soared in recent weeks. At the end of May, its then new record was $2,500. So it's up almost $1,000 above its previous record. It dropped to about $2,000, now spiking again. I'm kind of on the fence with cryptocurrencies myself. I don't really know what to think about them, but I'll tell you one thing for sure. I sure wish I would have bought a whole bunch of Bitcoins back when I first found out about them in 2011. I was out in California working for Michael C. Rupert, and he was convinced that the global economy was going to collapse. He was convinced that Bitcoin was a joke, just a flash in the pan. Nothing was going to come from it. And we could have got in at about $9 per Bitcoin, and now they're worth $3,400 a piece. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. David Levy putting in some good stuff here. Safe haven, gold, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum. Fiats are slowly dying. Bitcoin now has Visa debit cards to spend in many ways, even withdraw from a bank. Thanks for the info, David. He's saying it's going to 10K. I've read some reports on that too. You know, I don't know. It makes sense to me to divest from these fiat currencies, to divest from the global banking cartel. And alternative currencies like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum seem like a good way to do that. But I don't give a full endorsement. And again, I don't know what's going to happen to cryptocurrencies when the next recession hits. You know, the stock market, I can't stress it enough, it is artificially inflated. They've been printing money like it's going out of style, and that money becomes increasingly worthless through inflation. That money going to fund deficit spending in the government, about $85 billion a month gifted by the Federal Reserve, half of that going to the federal government, half of that being used by the big banks, big corporations to prop up the stock market. We got some more coverage on the Google engineer, James Damore. The New Hampshire Attorney General's office sued Purdue Pharma on Tuesday, alleging that the drug manufacturer has continued its deceptive marketing of OxyContin in a state that has been called the ground zero of the opioid epidemic. In a civil complaint, the state alleged that Purdue Pharma has downplayed the drug's risk of addiction, overstated its effectiveness, claimed it is nearly impossible to abuse, and failed to report suspicious prescribers. Okay, we covered that not long ago, how there are all these doctors who are running pill farms where they're just giving out opioids to their patients. It's heartbreaking. It's the latest in a string of lawsuits by state, county, and local governments accusing prescription opioid manufacturers of fraud and deceptive marketing. It'd be cool if the feds would really go after these pharmaceutical fraudsters too, but I don't see that happening. The Attorney General's office in New Hampshire has been investigating half a dozen drug companies and their marketing practices for 2 years. During that time, the opioid program has continued to grow. Almost 500 people died from overdoses in 2016. I'm assuming that's just in New Hampshire, a nearly tenfold increase since 2000. In October, the deputy administrator of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration called New Hampshire ground zero for the crisis. To defeat the epidemic, we must stop creating new users. And part of that is making sure these highly addictive and dangerous drugs are marketed truthfully and without deception, and in such a way as to minimize addiction risks or overstate benefits to patients. Okay, the opioid epidemic around the country, killing something like 65,000 Americans annually. Okay, these are prescription drugs. These are drugs people are getting from their doctors that are killing them in great numbers. I had 2 friends die from opium last winter, and it's sad. You know, if you got friends who are addicted to the opioids, try to help them get off them. Okay, don't get started with these pain pills. You know, if you got some chronic pain, try to figure out what's causing it. Try to change your lifestyle to improve your own general health. You know, maybe smoke a little reefer, eat a little reefer, see if that helps you out. There are a lot of other things than just opioids. Natalie Marino says, wow, that's a lot more than I thought. Yeah, I think the official statistic is something like 52,454 Americans died from prescription drug overdoses last year. But I just covered an article yesterday that says that figure could be at least 24% higher, which puts us up in, above 60,000 Americans dying annually from opioids. Moving along, we are into the horoscopes. A lot of people like their horoscopes read here. I'm no astrologer. I'm no occult believer and all that hoo-ha. But at the same time, I read it because it's in the newspaper and it's kind of fun. Anybody who wants their horoscope read, holler at me in the comments. I'm having a 4-star day. Taurus, emphasize your long-term objectives. Though you might have difficulty verbalizing what you want, you won't lose focus of your long-term goals. That's for sure. A friend could help you achieve much more than you want as long as you are willing to share more. I think that's with my business associate, Zachary. Tonight, where the fun is. Virgo, we had a request for Virgo from our friend Zachary. 4-star day. Deal with others directly. Though there might be a confusing moment or two, you will finally connect with a dear friend. This achievement will be a relief, as you will be able to have a discussion that you have been patiently waiting for. Tonight, let the other party open up. And Jeff Robertson looking for Gemini today. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Let's get into that. Gemini. 4-star day for you, Jeff Robertson. You might want to take another look at your long-term goals. You could feel it is difficult to fulfill your objectives with so much vagueness surrounding you. A misunderstanding is likely to throw you off your game, so watch out for that, Jeff. Try to ask pertinent questions. Tonight, a force to be dealt with. Get some. I got a great comment came in from Doug Meyer just now. Listening to the police scanner, overdoses happen daily, right? And, on that note, think of how many people die from drug overdoses, but it's not officially listed on the autopsy or in the police report as a drug overdose, right? People are ashamed if somebody's grandmother or spouse or husband, whatever, if somebody's family member dies from overdosing on heroin or opioids, they're probably going to try to cover that up because it's kind of a bad way to die, right? Brian Peterson wants Aries. Here we go. 3-star day, Brian. Watch out. You might wake up with the best of intentions, but confusion somehow permeates the day. If you maintain a sense of humor, others could see you smile your way through any obstacle that emerges. Don't lose focus of your objective. Tonight, say little and be a better listener. There we go. Moving along past horoscopes. We're done with that. This is a good example of how the mainstream media works. Okay, there are all sorts of crazy things going on in the world today. There are all sorts of sanctions being leveled against countries like North Korea, Venezuela, Qatar. Israel's trying to shut down the Al Jazeera news network, and there are sanctions against the sovereign nation of Qatar, telling them they must shut down their news media. But what do we got for our world? It's a bunch of Ron Burgundy news. Ron Burgundy, the panda born at the zoo. We got a whale. They moved the whale. Everybody heads up. Got to get a half page on the whale, and then we got a half page on tiger cubs, right? That's your mainstream media, folks. There's all sorts of stuff going on in the world, but they're going to devote a whole page to cute animals. I love cute animals, but you know what? It's not international news. Trey wants cancer. Trey, I'm going back just for you, bud. 4-star day. Avoid getting too caught up in the moment and what is happening. Confusion surrounds a personal matter or a discussion, and you might feel as if no one is really listening to you. I'll listen to you, Trey. You got a problem, you talk to me. I got your back. You could have difficulty focusing. Tonight, reach out to a dear friend at a distance. All right, now we're really moving on for real. This is cool, I have to say. You know, I've been ragging on the Jackson Hole Daily for quite a while about the absurd amount of advertising and the absurd waste of paper in modern mainstream media. You know, the wealthiest county per capita, there are a lot of advertisers. 44 pages today. But what's really cool, they seem to have reformatted their dining listings so they all fit on one page, or 2 pages rather, versus 4. Previously, until yesterday, this section of the paper, where this is just an advertisement for all the restaurants that list in their paper, they cut it in half. So that's pretty cool. Great job, Jackson Hole Daily. Way to cut down on your absurd wastefulness of paper. Now, if you could just report the actual news too, that would be fabulous. But in all honesty, Jackson Hole Daily, pretty good newspaper. That's why I look at it. We're on to our top headline today. If you poop where you burgle, don't forget to flush. A man accused of burglarizing a Southern California home took a bathroom break and left DNA evidence in the toilet that led to his arrest, an investigator said Tuesday. The suspect did his business and didn't flush it during the October break-in in the city of Thousand Oaks, said Detective Tim Lohman of the Ventura County Sheriff's. That allowed investigators to collect evidence to conduct a DNA profile. It matched another profile in a national database, and detectives tracked down the suspect at his home in the nearby city of Ventura. Andrew David Jensen was arrested July 22nd on suspicion of first-degree residential burglary, a felony. His bail was set at $180,000. Blah, blah, blah. So long story short, they took a fecal sample out of this toilet. So if you're going to rob somebody, don't leave your poop in the toilet, especially if your DNA is in a national database. It's important to note, you know, there are all these TV shows out there like CSI that portray the, you know, DNA evidence, the forensics departments of police stations as being these omnipotent, flawless entities. And it's not quite true. We've covered that here in the past, how it has been proven that people will actually make up evidence in order to incriminate people, just like cops have a tendency to plant drugs on people that they pull over, stuff like that. Sad to see, sad to see. Oh, we get into sports, the biggest distraction of all, okay? Can't stress it enough, sports, bread and circuses. The fact that there are 4 pages of the newspaper today devoted to sports, that there are countless sports networks, that sports are broadcast all over the place, that there are sporting events in every major metropolitan city every damn day. It's a huge distraction. On top of that, it also teaches kids that they should try to become professional athletes instead of devoting their lives and their passion to something that actually matters. Can't stress that enough. You know, sports are fun. Stay active, stay healthy. But watching sports, you know, spending $100 to get a ticket to the big game and then going there and eating a bunch of hot dogs and drinking a bunch of cheap, shitty beer, it's not going to make you a better person. It's not going to get you any closer to fulfilling your life's purpose. It's a huge distraction, a huge waste of resources, a huge waste of time, and a huge detriment to our civilization. You know, stay active, stay healthy. Fuck pro sports. Into classifieds, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8.5 pages of job listings. Of course, most of these jobs pay less than $20 an hour. And at the same time here in Jackson, real estate prices at all-time record highs. Once again, the average rent, you want a room in Jackson, you're looking at forking out at least $1,000 a month for a bedroom. It's sad. I'm going to go through the rest of my news here and see if I got anything else worth covering. Ron Paul says the war drums are beating North Korea in the crosshairs. That's on antiwar.com. No surprise. Consortium News reporting today that there's a new twist in the Self-Rich murder case and the DNC leaked emails conspiracy theory. Okay, if you're not familiar with that, it turns out that the emails, Russia was implicated in the hacking of the DNC. It turns out those emails were actually leaked, and all the talk of Russian interference in the media with the election has been a heck of a distraction for the last 6 months. But there's really no concrete proof that Russia had anything to do with that. Inspired Bank Exits, what's up there, Tim? Hey, Tim, I want to come out and visit you in LA soon, so let's talk about that. I think we got another big road trip coming up. Maybe we can do some damage to the mainstream. Again, Israel moving to shut down Al Jazeera, more censorship. Again, the entire nation of Qatar suffering from a blockade due to their having their own media. It's sad. Just like YouTube censoring content. Again, I can't stress enough the power of this Paul Craig Roberts article on paulcraigroberts.org at the Institute for Political Economy. Fake news, a U.S. media specialty, okay? The mainstream is fake news. Brian Williams teeing off that our job is to scare people to death over North Korea. I didn't mention already, I got to go back, John Stossel. Stossel, another mainstream media pundit, actually put out a really good article today regulating guns to the point I have to shoot off my mouth, okay? Talking about people visiting New York State. One guy went up there with just an empty magazine from a rifle in his carry-on, or not in his carry-on, in his luggage. He declared it to the TSA. New York police showed up and arrested him for having something that's banned in New York, and it's a felony. He got out of jail, but it cost him $15,000 just for carrying a magazine that was empty in New York State. So if you got guns, even if they're registered in another state, watch out around New York. But a pretty good article from John Stossel there, right? I'm all in favor of gun control. I don't like gun control in the sense of using both hands, right? I don't like guns. I wish that we lived in a world without guns. But considering that our government is the world's largest drug dealer and arms dealer, and they have a tendency to attack their own citizens, like we saw out at Standing Rock, like we see with police brutality every day, it's probably a pretty good idea that we stay armed until Uncle Sam decides to reform his ways, right? And that's it for today. Well, maybe I got a few more here on the phone. Let's take a quick looky look. Thank you to my 2 viewers on Instagram. This is a fun little experiment. We're probably going to start up a Wake Up News Instagram page pretty soon. Also, I forgot to mention the NIKKEI Asian Review, cracks appearing in the U.S.-China economies threatening global growth. Indicators show cooling of 2 main drivers of the worldwide economy. Check that out at NIKKEI, AsianReview.com. Cracks appearing in U.S.-China economies. Again, Bitcoin up 600. U.S. credit card debt at all-time record highs. The Sydney Morning Herald, we're talking about the economy crashing, the cracks. That whoosh, the great Chinese property pullback, talking about Chinese people bringing their money back to China instead of investing in inflating the government or the real estate values in cities like New York. Oh, and then, I got a few other articles here, but we're calling it a day. Thank you so much for tuning in today here at Wake Up Wyoming. Maybe not my best show ever, but I'm going to keep trying. I think my smart guy glasses actually make me a little stupider. I want to look reputable and intelligent, but maybe the glasses just aren't doing it. Thank you all for tuning in. As always, remember, stay active, stay aware, but stay optimistic, at least about your personal life, right? We have to take care of ourselves. We're living in the middle of a depopulation agenda. So if we don't take care of ourselves and we don't stay active, we don't focus on our health and the health and well-being of the people we love, we're kind of doing the global techno-fascists a favor by just killing ourselves off. Me personally, I'd rather stick around and see what happens, and I hope you do too. Thank you so much. Thanks for all your likes, your comments, your shares. Tell your friends. If you got people, if you're afraid to share this video, send it in a message to a few people you think might be interested. I really appreciate all of you. You know, when I started doing these, at the end of these videos, I'd have like 15, 20 people. Now we got 41 viewers going into the 50th minute. So thank you so much for being here. We truly appreciate all of you. And I'm signing off. Wordy guy that I am. Y'all take care. One love. Peace.